Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're back in War Thunder and it's time to look at a very special vehicle. This is the La-174. The place where you'll find it on the tech tree is actually after the La-15. It sits at 8.0 and it will put you back 200,000 research points and also 790,000 silver lions. So this machine is quite costly, and for good reason. The fact that it is an 8.0 vehicle means that 200,000 research doesn't really surprise anyone. At the same time, this is a special event vehicle. It has been offered twice. The first time was around about 3 years ago, and the other time is exactly now. So, if you have the La-15 unlocked, or if you have to grind through it to get this aircraft, then go for it. You have until the 18th of September. Just to note that you do have to research it and also buy it to be able to keep it until after the challenges are finished. Now, before we go into this general review of the La-174, I just want to start off with some caveats. I am personally not normally a jet player. I don't particularly enjoy jets, and the only reason I ground out this vehicle was to add it to the collection that I have, and also to bring this video to you if you do not have the time to grind it out yourself, and hopefully it will be there in the future for you if you can't at this time. So, there are many other YouTube channels out there which I would highly recommend, such as McChicken Bites, Mags TV, Orange Doom. There's many of them that you can go and see that I would point you towards to show you jet combat and also how to fly and all of this stuff in jets. For me personally, even though I've been playing the game for a very long time, I've generally stayed away from jets. Even though I have a lot of them unlocked, I much prefer propeller aircraft from a historical point of view and also just from a gameplay point of view. But I'm going to go through little things that I've noticed with this aircraft, but if you're looking for a full-fledged review, go to one of those guys. If you're looking for my general opinions on this aircraft, then, well, you're here, aren't you? So let's first of all talk about what it's armed with. It's armed with 3 23mm, the NR23 guns, which is very similar, or exactly the same even, as what you find on the La-15. You can also find these guns in various formats, such as the NS-23s on the Yak-17s, the Yak-15s, the MiG-15s and the MiG-9s, and even the Yak-30, which has exactly the same guns as the La-15 and 174. Now, these guns are seen as kind of not great in the game because they have a habit of sparking, and through my experiences with the La-15 grinding this machine and also playing it, it seems like that is an unfortunate issue. If you are able to land a hit, you will land a critical, but a lot of the time you will spark, and it will annoy you to no end. And the fact that you only have 300 rounds of ammunition between 3 guns, all holding 100, means that you're either going to have to burst fire while around the place, or you're going to have to go back to base quite often. Now, for me personally, I like the idea of trying to get a kill and then trying to get back to base, just because of the style of this aircraft, and that's basically what I go for. What is interesting about the La-174, which does actually put it apart from something like the La-15, is the bulletproof glass. Now, on the front of the aircraft, in front of the pilot, it actually has 155mm of bulletproof glass. This means that head-ons are generally a better idea to do in this machine than any other, but really understand that if you take wing damage, if you take any damage, especially to the engine has a habit of dying randomly when you actually get hit in it. It doesn't just go orange, it will go red very, very quickly, so you'll have to go back to base very quickly. But even if you get hit on the inner side of the wing or the outer side, this thing is pretty much combat ineffective. Now, that seems to be the way that a lot of jets are. The only place where you can critical a jet and it not be a real hindrance seems to be the elevator, which I've hit many a time and nothing has really happened. But anyway, back to the vehicle, the 174. what you're getting out of this vehicle seems kind of interesting. At 8.0, you do get dragged up into a lot of 9.0 matches, but that seems to be an issue with the matchmaking of the vehicle itself. It can handle itself at 9.0, but what seems to happen a lot of the time, and I don't know whether this is just because people are grinding for the 174, but I will have a whole team of 8.0s on my side with maybe one MiG-17 at 9.0 facing a whole team of Sabres and Hunters, meaning that the balance that you generally see at most other BRs is just not present here, because you have a massive majority team of 9.0 vehicles against a massive majority team of 8.0 vehicles. But even with that said, even going in with a disadvantage in the La-174, there is still some tricks up your sleeve, but it all comes down to what you're going to be facing. It's very important at the start of the battle to see what you're facing and to work out how to deal with them. Now obviously, the only real way of doing this is if you see what the enemy team has, you see what BR it's going to be. So if you see a MiG-17 on your team, you know there's going to be a lot of Sabres. If it's American, if there's Britain involved, there's going to be some Meteors and Hunters. If it's Germany, you know it's Me-262s, Canada Sabres and Me-163s, stuff like that. So you either go by that way and then you can work out what you're facing, or you go it by another way, and that is basically by sight. A lot of battles at this higher BR do turn into mixed battles, where you have different planes of different nations facing each other. There have been many times while flying the La-15 and the La-174 where I've actually come up against many Russian aircraft, and the reason for this is because everybody is grinding the damn thing. So instead of just, if you're not in a position where you can see what the enemy team is going to be in, whether it's American or British or German or whatever, then you've got to do it by sight. And that means that your reaction to the situation has to be pretty much on point. The La-174 sits in an interesting place where it's able to outturn some aircraft and it's able to outspeed some aircraft, but it's very hard to find an aircraft which it does both too. So an example of this would be an Me-262. In my travels in the La-174, as long as it's not the rocket boosted 262, then you sit in an interesting scenario where you are faster than it, but it can outturn you. Very similar with stuff like the Attacker and the Vampire. So therefore you have to use your advantage in that role to be able to get behind the, to set up a boom and zoom situation, hit it maybe in a head-on if you can't get it in a different way, and then zoom off and then come back again and then just keep doing it like that. But if you face, let's say, something like a Sabre, an American Sabre, or a Hunter, you're gonna have to catch them out and try and get them to turn and force them to try and fight you on your grounds, which is pretty much impossible to do, but there are a lot of Sabre pilots which it seems like fall for this, where they will engage you in a turn fight and you'll be able to make them overshoot and hit them. Now, is this foolproof? No. And also, it's kind of like the situation you have with a BF-109 and a Spitfire. The BF-109 can keep energy over you the majority of the time because of its speed in the dive. But once that BF-109 pilot makes a mistake, then the Spitfire pounces on him. You are the Spitfire in this case when you're facing a lot of these vehicles which can go 100 to 150 kilometers faster than you, and you've just got to really play like that. So a lot of people see it as not as good as 9.0 vehicles, and I would agree. That's why it's not 9.0. But you still have to face the reality that you're going to have to face them a lot. And the best way of dealing with them is if they do not engage you in a turn fight or a turn and burn situation. What you have to do is you have to try and set up 2-on-1s. Now this is something I do a lot in propeller driven aircraft. Set up a situation where I see an enemy diving on another, one of my allies. I know for a fact that he's going to be focused on that ally, so therefore I dive on him. And therefore set up this situation where you probably save your ally and you're on the tail of an enemy. A classic bait and switch. Now obviously this leaves you open to other jets around the area, but if you're in a 9.0 match, you're going to have to take a chance like that. If you're in an 8.0 match, this thing seems pretty okay. to be honest. There are some vehicles that outturn you, as I said, the ME-262, the Vampire, and the Attacker. And there seem to be a few vehicles which are faster than you, such as even the P80, the F-84, which sits at 7.0 for some crazy reason, the Banshee, and many vehicles like that, even the Kicker. So they outturn you, but you are faster than them, or you are slower than them, but you outturn them. So once again, it's just a situation of working out what you're good at compared to them. Something that is kind of interesting about this machine is that even though its max speed is labelled as 976 kilometers an hour, you will never actually reach that. This thing will actually brake in a straight line if you let it do it. It can thrust 112%, which I would recommend the majority of the time doing. If your engine starts overheating, kick it back to 100, and then it will actually not overheat. So, and then a few seconds later, you can put on the 112 again if you feel like it. I also recommend the majority of the time taking the minimum amount of fuel. It starts off at 12 and ends up around 9 or 10 once you have all the upgrades, which means that you will be in the battle for a short period of time. You will try and get your kills and then get back to base since you don't have a lot of ammo. It doesn't have any extra ordnance or anything like that, which is kind of annoying. But anyway, back to the rip speed. So in a straight line, this thing can go over 950 kilometers an hour, which seems okay, but there are vehicles which can go faster than you at your BR or even lower than your BR. The issue is, your plane starts falling apart at 950. So if you're in a dive and you're going, 100%, 112% throttle, and you are approaching the 950, or even if you're just going in a straight line, kick your air brakes open, you'll lose that 10 to 20 kilometers without losing the majority of your energy, and you'll be able to stay safe. And also keeping that speed just in case you need it. That's really the only time the air brakes are pretty useful in this thing. Overall, even for slowing down, the air brakes are kind of bad. Landing this vehicle doesn't seem to be that much of an issue. You just have to get it around 350 kilometers an hour on approach. That will mean that you can get your gear out, and then your landing flaps and your air brake should be out anyway to try and slow the machine down. Because for whatever reason, the La-174 and the La-15 just don't like slowing down. And, I can comprehend them for that. That basically means that if you do get shot in the engine, you still have a lot of engine power, which will get you back to base. But it can be incredibly annoying sometimes when you're trying to lose speed, especially with an air brake which is so small and doesn't really do anything. But yeah, the way I play it is take off, get to around that 600-700 kilometers mark, get to roughly 2,000 meters around the center of the map, obviously running at 112%, wait for an enemy to dive after another one of your mates, and then go after him, hit the deflection shot or hit the head on, and then if you've taken damage, go back to base. If you haven't, pull out, see the situation, do the same thing again. Once you're out of ammunition or close to ammunition, go back to base, which should be within like a 4 or 5 minute period. And then you just go back to base, rearm, and then you go again. Now, the only way this doesn't work is if there's a ton of bombers on the enemy team, which it means it will elongate the match, but that's completely fine. It's just something you're going to have to get used to at this BR. One thing that is kind of disappointing about the 174 is that it doesn't actually have any extra ordnance or anything like that. So this thing is pretty much useless in ground battles. Which is fine. It just means it's a purely air realistic and air arcade plane, and it would be nice to see how useful it is in ground battles at going after planes which are full of rockets, but I've already seen it in air realistic, and once again it is working out what the enemy is good at, what can I do against it. But I've enjoyed my time in it. The majority of the time I've played jets, I haven't enjoyed it, just because I'm not very good at it. But after using the La-15, which I'd already unlocked, to unlock the La-74, I got a feel for the aircraft, and it makes me think later on, maybe I can take another step into jet aircraft and just give it a bit of time to understand what's going on and try and get used to the vehicles. Because I think maybe that's my main problem with stuff like this. I don't give it enough time to get used to it. And after getting used to it, I mean, I have a neutral KD in the LA15 and the 174 I've just started, and I have a neutral KD in that. So I'm pretty proud of myself, to be quite honest. And overall, I'm even proud of the fact that I have this thing. This is one of the special gems put in the crown of many War Thunder collectors. And it's nice to see it around again. Hopefully in the future, maybe in another 3 years, if you aren't able to get it this time, maybe it'll come back and you'll have the Russian tree researched. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.